Why do you feel incomplete even when everything seems to be in order? Who is that hidden figure you chase in dreams, in relationships, in the abysses of the soul? Why do you feel incomplete even when everything appears to be in order? Who is that hidden figure you pursue in your dreams, in relationships, in the abysses of the soul? What if the missing piece was never outside you? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it destiny. Those words from Carl Jung resonate like a whisper from a place you cannot name, yet instantly recognize, as if something deep within finally yearns to be seen. In this video, we will walk through the psyche's darkest and brightest territories, where reason meets myth and the mundane intertwines with the archetype. Today, you are not facing common content. You are facing an inverted mirror where your reflection blends with that of someone you never truly met, yet who has always been there, breathing in your decisions, your fears, and your loves. We are talking about the Anima and the Animus, two psychic presences that dwell within you, even if you deny it, even if you try to love another when, in reality, what you desire is to love yourself completely. Jung did not see them as mere symbolic constructs, but as living entities of the soul, capable of guiding or ruining, creating or destroying, uniting or tearing apart. Have you ever been completely fascinated by someone to the point of obsession? Or perhaps you rejected someone with a disproportionate, almost irrational intensity? Perhaps it wasn't the other person who caused it. Perhaps it was your unconscious projecting what you still couldn't bear to recognize in yourself. What we are about to explore is uncomfortable, but it is real. We will enter together into a process Jung called individuation, the reconciliation between what you are and what you hide from being. On that path, three powerful transformations occur: the falling of masks, the collapse of projections, and the birth of something new. Not a new you, but someone who finally holds their own center. Close your eyes, breathe deeply. Recall a dream featuring a figure of the opposite sex. Now ask yourself, is he or she just trying to show you who you truly are? If you are ready, let's walk. Understand this is not a journey of easy answers. It is a crossing where the ground may give way and the light may fail. Yet every step reveals a part of you that always longed to be remembered. Music. Imagine a figure within you that observes in silence. It does not speak your language, but whispers in symbols. It does not appear in the mirror, but manifests in your impossible loves, your silent obsessions, and the decisions you cannot explain. It is your forgotten half, and perhaps the most essential part of who you are. Carl Jung, like a cartographer of the soul, traced the map of this invisible presence, the anima in men and the animus in women. They are not simply the inner feminine or masculine. That would be too simple. They are the other within you, the difference that inhabits your identity, the opposite you do not control, but that shapes you like the tide shapes a rock. For Jung, the encounter with the shadow is merely the beginning, the apprentice's work, but the confrontation with the anima or animus is the true masterpiece of the soul. It is when you stop fighting your demons and start conversing with them. It is when you understand that your feeling of lack is not due to the other person. It is a lack of self. It sounds absurd, perhaps, but think. How many times did you fall in love with someone who seemed to fill exactly what you lacked, as if that person carried the key to an emptiness you never understood? And later, that same person became ordinary, irritating, or insufficient. What changed? According to Jung, the projection changed. In the beginning, you were not seeing the other person. You were seeing your anima or animus projected. What enchanted you was not the person of flesh and blood, but the reflection of something within you that you had not yet integrated. Do you understand the brutal realization of this? You can spend an entire life loving psychic images, that have nothing to do with reality, chasing phantoms that carry fragments of yourself, idealizing loves that are ultimately just unconscious attempts to become whole. This is why when those projections shatter, when the image falls and the real person appears, love turns into hatred, tedium, or sadness. The spell is broken. What remains? You alone facing what you refuse to see? That the emptiness was never about the other. It was always yours. The anima and the animus are like mythic figures within the psyche. They do not follow logic. They do not obey orders. They appear in dreams, delusions, and sudden, inexplicable desires. The anima, for Jung, carries the eros principle, the bond, the emotion, the fluid life that seeps through the cracks of the rational. The animus, in contrast, embodies the logos, the structuring reason, the judgment, the power of meaning. The problem is that when we ignore these figures, they do not disappear. They take revenge. If you do not recognize your anima, she possesses you, and you become a man who is unstable, melancholic, and emotionally reactive. If you do not confront your animus, he takes your voice, and you become a woman who is rigid, overly critical, and emotionally sterile. You are not living. You are being lived. But it does not have to be this way. The discovery of the other within begins with a small act of courage, listening without judging. Close your eyes and allow that figure to appear. It may come as a woman in a dream, a severe professor, or a wounded child. It may come with fear, rage, or tenderness. The key is not to flee, because if you truly listen, it can speak. And what it has to say may be the beginning of your freedom. Imagine for a moment that the other you seek in every relationship was always an inner calling. Not to find, but to integrate. Not to love someone, but to reconcile with what you rejected in yourself. That is the inverted mirror. It is not the world you need to change. It is the internal reflection that needs to be understood. From there, everything external transforms. Not because the world changed, but because you are now present. And perhaps, just perhaps, true quiet love without projection becomes possible. First with yourself, then with the other. If you have stayed this long, something inside you has already begun to move. Do not run from it. The anima and animus do not want to destroy you. They want to complete you. Before we continue, have you felt that the more you try to remain calm, the faster you break inside? That is not weakness. It is mental overload. We live filled with emotional noise, and no one taught us how to filter what truly matters. The real problem lies in a lack of mental structure. Most people act from emotion without knowing that a cold, firm, and controlled way of operating can be built. Yes, that can be trained. Omitted promotional block to maintain narrative flow and comply with sin agua rule. Did you ever love someone so intensely that it felt like you were losing your own name? Did you look into another person's eyes and feel you had found home? But a short time later, that very love turned into a silent battlefield, full of wounds you could not name. Do not blame yourself. You were not loving the other person. You were loving what you projected onto them. Jung warns us, what we do not recognize in ourselves, we end up casting onto others like an invisible veil, a lens that distorts everything. When the anima and animus are rejected, they do not stay quiet. They disguise themselves as passion, ideal, or soulmate, hiding precisely where we least expect them, in romantic love. But here is the paradox. True love does not blind. Projection blinds. Projection is the unconscious's most subtle trick. It makes us see the other as the bearer of what we lack, and in a way, they are. Not because that person is what you need, but because they activate the call of the forgotten part within you. You are enchanted by whoever awakens your anima or animus. You do not just want to love, you want to reunite with yourself. But by doing this unconsciously, you run even further away. How many times were you obsessed with someone you rationally knew was not good for you? How many times did you humiliate yourself, reshape yourself, or empty yourself just to keep someone near? Perhaps it was not love, perhaps it was archetypal possession. Jung calls this being possessed by the negative anima or animus. It is when you no longer know who is feeling, you or that inner figure that took the helm. The man taken over by the negative anima becomes hypersensitive, dramatic, emotionally unpredictable, oscillating between adoration and contempt. The woman dominated by the negative animus becomes cold, judgmental, and arrogant, as if carrying within her an invisible commission of judges ready to annihilate any mistake. These negative forms are not inherently bad. They are signs of imbalance, symbolic messages that entire parts of your psyche were exiled and are now returning, demanding recognition. Romantic love, in this sense, is a symbolic battlefield. It is where you deposit your desires, your wounds, and your hope for redemption. But the other person, the real person, cannot carry that for long. They break. You break. And what seemed like a fairy tale ends as tragedy or apathy. It is no coincidence. It is the unconscious trying to teach you something brutal and beautiful. No one will save you from yourself. Only you can do that. But how? Jung does not propose repression. He proposes relationship. You need to look at your anima, talk to her, listen to her. You need to dialogue with your animus, allowing it to reveal itself outside rigid formulas. See it not as a shadow projected onto the other, but as a living presence within you. This process hurts. It is like tearing out your own eyes to see with the soul, but it is liberating. When you withdraw the projections, love begins to change its form. It ceases to be dependence, idolatry, or disguised lack. It becomes presence. A real relationship between two beings who no longer need to complete each other because they have already recognized what was missing inside. By withdrawing the projection, you give the other person back the humanity you had stolen from them. You finally give yourself the chance to love truly. Do you still remember your first great love? Now ask, what exactly did you love there? The voice, the scent, the way they looked? Or was it the part of yourself that was finally allowed to exist through that person? Every overwhelming passion is partly a scream from the unconscious saying, look at this in yourself, recognize it, integrate it. If you can hear that scream without surrendering to the trance, something shifts. You stop being a toy of your unconscious desires and become the author of your own destiny. That is the beginning of transformation. Not everything that inhabits us arrives with a name. Some forces come as distant voices that speak in silence, whispering behind our most intimate desires. The anima and animus do not emerge ready-made within us. They are revealed in layers, masks upon masks, archetypes that dance in the depths. Each of them, according to Jung, possesses 4 faces, 4 stages, 4 faces of the invisible. You never encounter the totality all at once. It visits you little by little, first as instinct, then as beauty, later as meaning, and finally as wisdom. In the man's soul, the anima begins with Eve, the instinctive woman tied to the body, the mother, the origin of life. It is the man's first contact with the feminine, charged with desire, fear, and the need for protection. The woman is seen as a refuge or a threat. The man does not yet love. He needs. Then comes Helen, the enchantress, inspired by Helen of Troy. She represents the feminine as beauty, sensuality, and seduction. The man in this stage sees the woman as a muse, an aesthetic ideal, but still not as a person. He projects, idolizes, desires without truly seeing. He still loves the image, not the soul. Then arrives Maria, the saint. Here, the anima gains emotional and spiritual depth. The man begins to recognize the woman as a soul partner, a sensitive and receptive presence. He begins to listen. He begins to see. Yet there is still distance. The woman is elevated, sacralized, almost untouchable. It is a love that fears the profane, that avoids the real. Finally emerges Sophia, the wisdom. In this final stage, the anima ceases to be a projection and becomes the inner guide. She no longer resides in another woman. She lives within the man as intuition, as a link to the unconscious, as a source of creativity and meaning. Now, the man sees the feminine as a part of himself. He no longer seeks, he listens, and in that silence, he creates. In women, the path is equally profound. The animus begins as brute force, projected onto athletic men, warriors, or dominators. The woman in this stage is attracted to physical power, to the one who acts rather than the one who feels. It is love for the protector or the dominant figure. Next emerges the romantic hero, the adventurer, independent, free. She desires the one who defies the world and perhaps will save her from it. But like every archetypal hero, he does not stay. He leaves, and she remains, waiting for a return that may never come. The third stage is the man of the word, the thinker, the professor, the orator. Now the animus is projected onto men who carry meaning, the philosopher, the preacher, the writer. The woman here seeks a man who speaks to the soul. Still, she does not see herself. She defines herself by his discourse. Lastly emerges the spirit mediator. The animus becomes internal. It is no longer the man outside, but the principle of clear action within her. She begins to express her ideas with firmness, to make decisions without needing external validation. She is thought and heart, strength and tenderness. She does not speak for anyone. She speaks from within. These four phases of both the anima and the animus are not linear stages. They are spirals. You might be between Helen and Maria, or between the hero and the thinker. Sometimes you return to Eve, other times you brush against Sophia. The psyche does not walk in a straight line, it dances. And the danger lies in that dance. If you cling to one of these faces, if you believe it is the only truth, then you are imprisoned. That man you fell in love with may have only been your animus disguised. That woman who seemed like your salvation may have only been your anima begging to be seen. If you don't know this, you will get lost. You will cling to one stage and call it love. But true love is born only when the other person stops being a screen for your projection and becomes a mirror of your truth. Jung invites us to ask, where is my anima or animus today? This question is not for judgment, it is for integration. Only when we recognize these stages do we stop living under them and begin to live through them. In practice, that changes everything. You begin to notice why certain bonds repeat, why certain emotional patterns impose themselves, why you always fall for the same type of person, even knowing it will hurt. Because fundamentally, you are not relating to someone else. You are relating to a part of yourself that is pleading to be accepted. Only when you accept it does the transformation begin. There are moments in life when something breaks you in silence, not with thunder, but with small internal cracks. Suddenly, everything that once made sense begins to feel artificial. The roles you played, the opinions you defended, even the desires you cultivated, start to feel like they belong to someone else. Or perhaps they always did. That collapse, that internal tremor where the world remains the same? But you do not, Jung called the dark night of the soul. It is the moment the ego, that character you constructed to exist in the world, begins to crumble. Though it seems like destruction, it is the start of creation. The death of the ego is the birth of the totality. The ego for Jung is the center of consciousness. It is necessary. Without it, we wouldn't know where we end and the other begins. Without it, we don't work, express ourselves, or choose. But the ego is also limited. It believes it is the whole when it is only a part. It is like a flashlight believing it is the sun. Then life arrives with its losses, crises, and encounters with the unconscious, showing us that something much greater is beating beyond conscious will. This scares us because we feel we are losing control. In reality, we are only losing the illusion of control. This is the most dangerous phase of the journey because the ego fights to survive. It creates resistance, projects blame onto others, drowns itself in distractions. It prefers to be unhappy rather than disappear. You feel it as anguish, confusion, or that unbearable sensation of, I no longer know who I am. But what is collapsing is the shell, the role, the mask you wore to be accepted, to feel safe, and to avoid looking inward. Jung said that when the ego confronts the unconscious, two things can happen. It enters into dialogue, or it is crushed. Dialogue demands humility. It requires you to recognize that you are not the center of your own psyche, that forces, symbols, voices, and archetypes exist within you that know more about your truth than your rational mind ever will. Curiously, this collapse often coincides with intense symbolic dreams. Dreams of death, shipwrecks, earthquakes, and loss of identity. Jung saw these dreams as signs that the psyche is reorganizing its center. The ego yields its place to the self, the true center that unites conscious and unconscious, reason and mystery. But it is not easy. When the ego dies, emptiness arrives first, a kind of grief without a corpse. You weep for something you do not understand. You miss something you cannot name. This is the symbolic desert. It is the space between who you were and who you still do not know you are. In that desert, temptations arise, returning to the comfort zone, blaming others, seeking salvation in gurus, doctrines, or distractions. But if you resist, if you have the courage to stay there without answers, without certainties, without guarantees, something new begins to emerge. It is at this point that the self, the real center of the psyche, reveals itself. It does not arrive with shouts, it arrives with symbols, with subtle intuitions, with the sensation of being, for the first time, in tune with something that needs no explanation. The death of the ego is necessary because the ego alone is insufficient for life. It wants control where there is chaos, reason where there is mystery, security where everything moves. The self, however, embraces paradox. It does not seek answers. It seeks truth, and truth sometimes destroys us before rebuilding us. If you are living a moment of loss of meaning, if everything seems to be crumbling inside you, breathe. You may be on the verge of the deepest transformation of your existence. Perhaps what is dying in you is not an error. Perhaps it is just the beginning of your wholeness. In that empty, silent, and terrifying space, a new psychic structure begins to be born. It is no longer centered on the ego, but on the totality. Are you ready to hear what your soul has been trying to tell you for years? There are symbols that belong to no culture. They appear alone in dreams, scribbles, and brief visions. They emerge as if they are too ancient to have an author. Among all of them, one repeats with unsettling frequency, a circle with a center, a mandala. Jung observed something extraordinary. Patients with no spiritual or artistic knowledge would spontaneously begin drawing mandalas during the most intense moments of their internal transformations. They appeared almost as if the soul were trying to organize itself through a drawing, as if saying, I cannot speak, but I can show you what is happening here. But why a circle? Because the circle is the symbol of totality. It has no beginning and no end. It is the opposite of the linear ego. It is the form of the self, the unifying center of the psyche. Most strikingly, these mandalas did not come with explanations. They simply appeared as a mirror the soul held up to the chaos to say, Look, there is order. Even in the abyss, there is a center. Have you dreamed of circles, spirals, or geometric patterns? Did you ever feel the urge to draw without knowing why? Perhaps your soul was trying to heal itself. Jung said that when a mandala appears in a dream or emerges spontaneously during a crisis, something profound is being reorganized. The unconscious found a way to contain the collapse, to transform desperation into a gesture, to give form to the formless. This is not just symbolic, it is physiological. Patients reported improvement in physical symptoms after drawing their mandalas. Insomnia ceased, pain diminished, and tears came, but with relief, not despair. It was as if the body was finally included in the conversation. The mandala is not an answer. It is a bridge between what you think and what you feel, between the part you show and the one you dare not touch. It does not appear only in drawings. It appears in coincidences you cannot explain. The book you find by accident that describes exactly what you are feeling. The music that plays and makes you weep without knowing why. Those strange moments when everything seems to align, not externally, but internally. That is the self trying to reach you, trying to reorganize your psyche around a new center. But beware, the ego loves to hijack this process. It sees the mandala and wants to interpret it, control it, and understand it. Jung warned, the mandala is not to be read, it is to be lived. What matters is not what it means, but what it produces in you. If you feel more calm, more coherence, more connection to something greater, then it has fulfilled its function. Here is an almost secret truth. The unconscious wants to heal you, but it will not do so with words. It uses images, symbols, patterns. It speaks in a language that needs no logic, only space. Have you given your soul that space? Have you allowed it to speak outside of cliches, goals, and to-do lists? Draw a simple circle. It does not have to be beautiful. Just be sincere. Put what you feel in it, even if you cannot name it. And perhaps, just perhaps, you will see that there is a center and it is beating. It has always been there, waiting for you to stop running and start listening. Ultimately, the cure does not come from outside. It comes from the movement organized inside, from the instant when chaos and silence meet and form a circle. This journey was never about learning concepts. It was about remembering what was always there, on the edge of consciousness. The anima, the animus, the self, projections, collapses. None of this is theory when lived with the soul exposed. If you have reached this point, you are likely feeling just that. This video was not just a lesson, it was a mirror. Perhaps uncomfortable, perhaps beautiful, perhaps both. There is a truth that Jung whispers behind all his pages, between the lines of the mandalas, in the silence of dreams. Nothing in you needs to be destroyed for you to become whole. Everything only needs to be seen. The anima, with its fluid voice, wants to show you where you forgot to feel. The animus, with its firm presence, wants to remind you that your word has weight. Neither wants to dominate you. They want to dance with you. For that, you have to step out of the center, stop being just the ego, and start being the system. A moving center, a point that expands, includes, falls, and rises. Be the reorganized chaos, the pain that became a symbol, the shadow that became a bridge. Do you know that moment when you feel empty, alone, without knowing who you are? You may be closer to totality than ever, because the soul sometimes only speaks after the collapse. You no longer need to fall in love with ghosts or hate in another what is yours. You can love with open eyes. You can relate without carrying your childhood on your back. You can begin to live for the first time as a whole being. And that changes everything. That is true freedom, being you without fear of what you still do not understand about yourself. To welcome the unknown as part of home. To embrace delusion without losing lucidity. to breathe the mystery without needing to decipher it. Perhaps the meaning of life is not in answering all the questions, but in living deeply the ones that never fall silent. Thank you for having stayed. Thank you for having felt with me. Your presence in this space, though silent, is a form of resistance to superficiality, hurry, and the noise of the world. You chose to immerse yourself, and that is rare. May you sleep differently tonight. May you dream a symbol, or may you simply breathe deeper. Whatever happens, remember, you are not alone.